Good afternoon and welcome to the special board meeting of the School Board of Alachua County. This is July 30th, 2019, and we are here for the approval of the 2019-20 tentative budget and for the advertising and public hearing. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Dr. McNeely, seconded by Ms. Roy. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Assistant Superintendent Rolla.
Thank you, Chairman Hyatt. This is the second installment of the TRIM process. Obviously, we met last week on Tuesday for the board to adopt approve the millage and budget for advertising. That advertisement ran in this Sunday's Gainesville Sun, and today we're going to ask the board to tentatively adopt the budget for the 1920 fiscal year. Just in terms of the process, I know we only do this a couple times a year, so kind of how the layout works is I'll go through a quick presentation on the millage rates and budget, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Chairman Hyatt, for citizen input, and then we'll go through the reading of the resolutions.
Okay, and let me say, since I thank you for mentioning that, it's not on the agenda, but citizen input would be I would assume we would do this, since there are two different votes, we would have a citizen input and a board input after both.
We typically, for this meeting, since there are obviously two items, we
Right.
kind of intertwine.
Okay.
We usually do
Okay.
one opportunity for citizen input after the presentation in
Okay.
advance of the vote.
Okay, very good. Oops.
All right, so the way we always start out this meeting is just with the definition of the rollback millage rate. So the rollback millage rate is a computed millage rate that, when applied to the new tax roll, generates the same revenues as the prior year. We're just going to go, and this obviously is going to be familiar to the board, but go through the millage rates proposed for next year. So for last year, the board levied 4.016 mills, and this millage local effort is required for us to participate in the Florida Educational Finance Program. And obviously for this year, we're receiving a little over $109 million. So for last year, we levied 4.106 mills, which generated $64.63 million. To generate the same amount of funds, the rollback millage rate is 3.836 mills. And for next year, we're proposing the required 3.896 mills, which will generate a little over $67 million. The discretionary operating millage is required for the board to receive $3.8 million in state compression funds. It's capped at 0.748 mills. For last year, we levied the full 0.748 mills, which generated $12.04 million. To generate the same amount of funds, the rollback millage rate is 0.7145 mils, and for next year, again, we're proposing the maximum 0.748 mils, which will generate $12.88 million. The capital outlay millage, we're all familiar with over our discussions, especially in the last few years with the sales tax. The capital outlay millage is to support our capital operations and capital infrastructure. It's capped at 1.5 mils, and for last year, we levied the full 1.5 millage rate, which generated $24.14 million. To generate the same amount of funds, the rollback millage rate is 1.4328 mils, and for this year, again, we're going to be proposing the full 1.5 mils, which will generate $25.84 million. Voter approved operating, this is our 1 mil fund. Last year, obviously, we levied the one mil that's in the referendum, which generated $16.09 million. To generate the same amount of funds, the rollback millage rate is 0.9552 mils, And for this year, again, we're proposing the full 1 mil, which will generate $17.22 million. And just for reference, because I know we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, when we're talking about the funds generated from these millages, it's a requirement in the law to report these as 100%, as if we're going to receive 100% of the funds. But we only budgeted 96% of funds because we know we're not going to receive all of them. So the revenues on this are going to look a little bit different than what we actually have proposed in the budget, just based on the fact that we know we're not going to receive all the funds. You combine required local effort, discretionary operating, capital outlay, and voter-approved operating millage. The combined millage rate for last year was 0.7264 mils, which generated $116.9 million. The rollback millage rate for this year is 6.9385 mils, and for next year, we're proposing the combined millage rate of 7.144 mils, which will generate $123.5 million. So this slide does a couple things. It kind of looks at the actual millage rate comparison, and then also the estimated revenues that we anticipate from levying these mills. Obviously, as we talked about in our last meeting, the only millage rate proposal, or the only millage rate that's proposed to change, is the required state-determined piece, which is the required local effort. That millage rate is decreasing 0.12 mils overall, and then you can see the 1920 tax revenues estimated, and these obviously are going to be at the 96% budgeted tax revenue rate. So the combined millage rate will generate $118 million, and then the next column shows you what the state piece is in terms of the required local effort, FEFP piece, and then also the discretionary operating compression funds for a total of $109 million in state funds. Next couple slides kind of look at the impacts of these millage rates on the individual taxpayers. So we give this example every year, but basically, as we all know, with the Save Our Homes program, the increase, assuming there's no changes to the dwelling or tangible property and so on and so forth, if there's no modifications, the property price is only allowed to increase it by 3% or the CPI, whichever is less. So for this year, the 2019 year, the CPI rate is 1.9%, so the maximum increase, assuming there's no improvements, would be 1.9. So in this example, you've got a house that was assessed value of $125,000 last year with a $25,000 homestead exemption, so a taxable value of $100,000. If you increase that assessed value by the 1.9% and less the homestead exemption, the new taxable value would be $102,375. So when you apply the millage rates for the respective years, you can see for the 2018-19 fiscal, in this specific example, the taxpayer would pay $726.40, and then for the new rates, including the increase in value, the taxpayer would pay $731.37, so an additional a little under $5 in this specific example based on the rates for the new year. So this is kind of difficult to see, I'm sure, but this is another example that we kind of go through every year. So basically, it's an assumption that you purchased a house in 1997 with an assessed value of $125,000, and obviously it had the homestead exemption, so your taxable value is at $100,000. And then what we've done here is kind of applied the millage rate for each respective year, and then also increase the home's value as it would through all these years, and kind of adjusted it each year, and you can kind of see on the right whether the taxes are increased or decreased. So you can see in 2009-10, We did have a bump, that's when we approved the 1 mil. And you can see over the period of time, the actual, what I would consider like the investment in education for the individual parcel is actually decreased over this period of time, and that also includes the 1 mil. If you pull the 1 mil out of this calculation, it's actually a net reduction of $180 for the period of time. And at this point, I will turn it back over to you, Chairman Hyatt, for citizen input.
Public input? Okay, if not, then we'll move ahead to item number 1.
All right, the first resolution is for the millage rates. The superintendent recommends that the school board approve the tentative millage for the 2019-2020 fiscal year as presented.
Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Surton. You want to make it a second? Second by Ms. Roy. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. On to item 2.
Resolution number 20-02. The superintendent recommends that the school board approve the tentative budget for the 2019-2020 fiscal year as presented.
Motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Ms. Roy, seconded by Dr. McNeely. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Rella. Thank you, board, and we are adjourned.